Well, hello, guys. This is Katie with Vintage and Vinyl with another great reading. We are back with House of Flesh, and we are doing 2 chapters tonight. And I am so excited about this House of Flesh by Bruno Fisher. Now, I am at a new location than I normally am because I'm taking care of my brother's cat, Clyde. So tonight, we are doing a live reading from Clyde the cat's house, and it's going to be fun and probably a little bit quieter since Louie's not here. Hi, love. Welcome, welcome. We've got Edward, El Unico Thrifter and Treasures is here. Steph sells stuff by the seashore. Welcome, welcome. We've got my mom is in the house. We have Linda Punky. We have Tim Teofane. Tim, I just got your package. Thank you so much. I can't wait to open that. Jennifer Meller is here. Welcome, welcome. Jeannie, Chicago lady. We've got Barbie, Punk, Funk, and Junk. Auntie Christy is tuning in. Welcome, welcome. So you might get an appearance from Clyde the cat. I think he is napping right now, but we'll have to see if he makes an appearance during this live. So we are now in the next couple of chapters of House of Flesh, which is exciting. And we are almost done. You can see that the book is almost to its end. We are in chapter 24. And then there is chapter 28, I believe is the last chapter. So we are getting there, and this is very exciting. So I'm thrilled to be reading this. I can't wait to see what happens. We've had a lot going on. Now, our main character was jailed, I should say, for murder, for attempted murder, but he's been let out on bail, and so we'll have to see what happens with him. We are waiting to find out what Harry does and what they discover. I really don't think that he's the one that murdered Dr. Doan, but we still don't know what happened to Layla. We are assuming that she was murdered, but she's not there, and she didn't take her wallet or anything with her, so that's still interesting. I don't know what happened to her. And then, of course, we've got an interesting suspect now, too, because I believe Mr. Hickey, the police officer, not Mr. Hickey Sr., but the police officer, Mr. Hickey, I think he's probably a suspect as well, because he's done some interesting things. And, he used to love Alice Barton, which was Dr. Doan's previous wife. So there's a lot of things happening in this book. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who actually murdered Dr. Doan, but if I had to pin it on anyone, I do probably think that it was the police officer, because he really didn't like Dr. Doan at all for stealing Alice and potentially killing Alice, because we think that they found her bones, but that really hasn't been confirmed yet either. So we'll have to see. And let me turn off my phone here. That would help a lot. So I'm excited to find out what happens next. I think there's a lot of twists and turns in this book that's just so fascinating. And I love reading these books because they are so cool to see what's in these 1950s novels. Hey, Steve, how are you doing? What if Polly turns out to be an axe welding maniac? It could be Polly Wellman, because, Polly Wellman also loved our main character, Harry, and she is the one. Well, we'll find out more about this, but I think that she is the one that called and told Dr. Doan. Because remember, she saw that from the window upstairs in the general store. And I think she's the one that called and tattled. I think she was the town tattletale. Of course, when you live in a small town, everything spreads quickly. All the news gets around and people talk. So there's been a lot of talk about this murder, I'm sure, in the small town, and a lot of speculation. Oh, you think his wife killed him? Well, that could be. That could be Linda. That very well could be. I don't know. We got to find out. Now, the cool thing about this book is this is a gold medal book, and I've talked about this, I think, each reading. But I love gold medal books because they really did change the way the publishing industry was done. Fawcett Publications made gold medal books, and they were the first mass-produced, technically, paperback books. There were paperback books in the 40s for the soldiers, so they did have pocket books. And of course, there was a paper shortage. So usually when you find those, the margins are very, very little and narrow, because they were trying to conserve as much paper as possible. So you'll find them where there isn't a margin, where the words go almost to the edge of the book. But gold medal books came around at the end of the 40s into the 50s, and they really were the first books that were mass-produced paperback books, and they gave people a way to buy books, and they made reading more affordable, because before then they had a lot of hardcover books, and those were very expensive for people. So that's pretty cool. And Fawcett Publications, he actually invented the first spinning magazine rack. So all of his books were in one of those spinning magazine racks, which I just think is so cool. Yeah, what is with Gail, Tim? We got to know about Gail. Now, that is our main character, Harry's ex-wife. And I think there's something fishy about her, too. I don't know. She just seems so bizarre. So we need to find all of this out very, very soon. So we are going to get started for our next reading. We're going to do 2 chapters tonight, which is really fun. I'm going to move the computer a little bit so that I can get a little bit better position for reading. And I'm sorry, folks, this is a new spot for me, so we are trying this out. I haven't done many readings over here at Carson's place. Oh, a spinning magazine rack would be so cool, wouldn't it, Steph? I would love to have one of those for all of my ephemera. How cool would that be in your house? Yes, it would be a lot of fun. Okay, so we're going to get started with the reading, and we are now in chapter 24. So let me get to that. We are just ticking along nicely in this book. There are so many fabulous chapters here. And I'm just enjoying this book. This book has encapsulated me, and I can't wait to see what happens next. So this is really fun. So we are going to get started with House of Flesh, chapter 24, right now. 4 women sat sheltered from the late morning sun on the porch of the Wellman store. One of them was Mrs. Wellman. They stopped talking when I pulled up in my car, and they gawked. They had been talking about me, of course, me and the Doanes and the murder. No doubt in the last 2 days, North Set must have given itself over to wholly enjoying the juiciest scandal it ever had. Mrs. Wellman didn't beam at me. I had ceased to be an eligible male for her marriageable daughter. On the contrary. Is George in? I said. She seemed to relax a bit, probably because I hadn't asked for Polly. I think he's in the backyard. The buzzing of an exciting conversation resumed as I rounded the corner of the building. I walked along the side of the house in the fenced-in yard, bonded by coloring flowers. They were Polly's handiwork. In a hammock under the only tree in the yard, an ancient, gnarled oak, George Wellman, lay reading what I guessed would have been a racing form. His bare chest was skinny and pale and hairy. So they let you out, he said. What'd you have to pull? I had lacked guilt. Huh, that's not what I heard. George let the paper flutter to the grass. Sure enough, it was a racing form. So you're the poor, pure Harry Wilde. Wouldn't do nothing they don't teach you in Sunday school. Mind if I laugh? I pulled up a metal outdoor chair and sat down. Don't laugh too soon, I said. They're looking for the killer still. What's that to me? The police might be interested in how Layla stopped you from blackmailing us when you barged in on us in her kitchen. Why'd they be interested? It could be she had to hold over you, and it was important to you to shut her up. Hey, wait a minute. He rolled onto his side. The hammock swung. She knocked her off her husband, or maybe you. That's the way I heard it. Are you sure that's the way it was? I said, and stared at him, making myself smile a little. George squirmed. Say, Layla didn't have nothing on me. She told me she knew how to make you keep your mouth shut. Yeah, well, she was one clever babe. I'll tell you what she said. She said if I tried to pressure you or told her husband, she'd go to the law. And I swear she was a witness and I'd offer you a bribe. She said she didn't give a hoot for her husband any more and was just nuts over you. Was going to divorce him anyway and marry you. So there'd be no skin off her if she was a witness against me. And you believed her? You darn tootin' I believed her. I knew Layla maybe better than anyone. Funny dame. Strictly one man. Hell, if she let you spend the night with her, it meant she was nuts over you. Like she said, and would do anything for you. Layla was no tramp. Sunlight formed patchy patterns through the trees. I stared at one in shape of a narrow triangle, and at the apex a daisy swayed. Tell me about Layla, I said. Such as what? Well, I only made love to her. I really never got to know her. George turned on his back, and the hammock swung gently. Ah, funny dame, he said. Got to know her 4 or 5 years ago in the big city. She was roaming with a dame I was doing some loving with, a blonde named Mary. Layla was going around with Brick O'Connell, bookmaker. He was taller than you ever, and red-headed. Seems Layla performed him tall. Like I said, she had an apartment with Mary, though many a night she didn't come home. Those nights she spent with Brick, nobody else. I know on the account of me being there so much and Mary telling me everything, and guys talking about how they couldn't get to first base with her. There wasn't a guy that didn't hanker for her. She wasn't the prettiest babe you ever saw, but, she had something. I don't know, she was so quiet-like, even at a party. She didn't make much talk or never really raised hell, but I don't know. He stroked his mustache. What the hell? You know what I mean. Yes, I said, I know. Then she and Brick broke up. Mary told me just got tired of him. Brick went off to the West Coast and Leah spent all of her nights at home. Strictly a one-man woman. You know what else was going to support her? She worked in a department store. She stood all day on her feet, selling ladies' undies or something. When there was guys ready and willing to set her up in style, with mink coats and penthouses and everything. There was even guys loaded with dough wanting to marry her. Mary and the other dames figured she had rocks in her head. Yeah, I don't mean Layla didn't keep coming to parties and letting guys take her out to nightclubs and shows, but it was strictly hands off. You can take my word. After me and Mary broke up, I spent plenty on Layla, taking her everywhere, but not even a goodnight kiss. George shook his head. Strictly love with her, and it had to be the right guy. Just 3 guys I know of in 5 years. Brooke O'Connell, then Doan, then you. And not getting anything out of it, like with that horse doctor she married. Giving up all the fun in New York, giving up the clothes and jewels and all the things a dame wants, and buying herself in this hick town in a broken down house and seeing almost nobody and going nowhere. He scowled at the overhead canopy of the branches. How do you figure a dame like that? Behind us, a door opened and closed. I glanced around and there was nobody. I understand she met Kenneth Doan through you. Well, I guess I'm responsible. There was a dame named Angus Hazard. Used to be a friend of mine and stepped off chorus line to marry a rich guy who made men's suits. They had a swanky place in Maine, and she invited a crowd of old friends up for a few days. I was invited to Layla too, and I had a car in those days. I said I could drive her up. It was the middle of May. I remember. We had to stay somewhere overnight on the way, and sure enough, I had ideas. Anyway, I had hopes. What I would have given for just one night with her. I made mistakes of stepping off here to see my folks because, well, it was on the way. George sighed. Why, I kid myself. She wouldn't have bunked with me that night anyway. Maybe I wasn't tall enough. When my old lady suggested we stay here overnight, Layla said sure. And that was it. She slept with Polly, and I slept in my old bed. Well, then how did she meet Doan? Oh, that same evening. Layla and I were taking a walk, and she said she was nuts about the country and never had a chance to walk in the moonlight. I figured maybe she'd get romantic. He laughed. Fat chance. Anyway, we met Doc Doan walking along, and we stopped and I introduced them. I'd met the guy the summer before, and when I spent time with the folks, and he used to come into the store. That's all there was. A few words, and we walked on. The next morning, when I was putting our bags in the car, I saw them standing at his station wagon in front of the store. I guess he'd come to buy something. I didn't think about it. 10 minutes later, we were on our way to Maine, and she didn't say a word about him. She never said anything, really, anyway. Did you see Lane and Doan in New York together? Nah, fact is I hardly ever saw her after that. Then I came up next spring to visit the folks, and you could have knocked me over when Polly told me that Layla was married to Doc Doan. I went over to see her, and there was in the broken down house with a bunch of dogs almost nobbling me over, wearing something the cat must have dragged in. Layla, who could have had a guy with $1,000,000 if she wanted. How do you figure a dame like that? I just can't. The shifting sun had plucked me out of the shade, and I was beginning to sweat, but I sat there, simmering with my thoughts far away and nothing definite, just sitting and thinking of her without form or substance, as if it would hurt too much to recall in detail her passionate body. Your mail, George Wellman was saying. I'd almost forgotten he was there. What? I said. Ah, seems you're getting company. Polly Wellman, slender and tight in a simple striped cotton frock, was coming towards us over the grass. In her hand were letters and newspapers, and that would be my mail. These days it was always accumulating at the post office. She handed me the mail without looking directly at me. I'd like to speak to you in private. Sure, Polly, what is it? In private, she repeated. Abruptly, George sat up in the hammock. He frowned. He appeared to say something, but he didn't. He bent over to pick up the racing form. Polly had started to walk towards the house, and I moved after her. Side by side, and at the same time, far apart, we walked along the side of the house to the road. Her head was down, and I took quiet while I was thinking of words. Then I said the only thing I could have. I'm sorry about all this, Polly. She didn't have to answer, didn't look up. By then we had reached the front of the building. I was relieved to find that the women were no longer on the front porch. We can talk while we drive, I suggested. She moved on to my parked car, but she didn't get in. When I pulled the door open, she looked at me with her blue eyes glistening wetly. I hoped desperately that she wouldn't burst into tears. What I have to say will only take a minute, she said. I was the one who told Dr. Doan about you two. I wasn't surprised, a woman's voice. Layla had said, and Polly was a woman who knew because her brother had told her. Well, it doesn't make any difference now, I said. It does. How I hate myself. I phoned Dr. Doan and didn't give my name, and I said his wife and you. She averted her face, and the light brown hair fell over her rounded cheek. I thought he'd make her give you up, and then you just... She sobbed and sobbed. Polly, let's just forget about it, I said. How can I? Her voice was back under control. I was the cause of it all. If I hadn't told him, all of this just wouldn't have happened. Well, it was bound to come out anyway, I said. She faced me, and then there was kind of a wild defiance in her face. I had to do it. I loved you. I didn't care what you did, and I still love you. And she ran into the store. I groped for a cigarette in my shirt pocket. I was shaken. I was remembering how Polly had said that evening when I had driven her home in the rain from the movies. I'll kill her before I'll let you have her. And when I had scoffed and called it nonsense, she had said, You think it's nonsense, don't you? And like that now, she had dashed into her house. I had my light. As I drew my smoke deep into my jittery insides, I found myself looking directly at Mr. and Mrs. Wellman. They were inside the store watching me through the plate glass window, and their eyes hated me. I climbed into my car and drove away. Well, guys, that is it for this chapter. We are going to continue on with the next chapter in just a minute. Welcome, Peterson. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm glad you are here. And yes, Clyde is the new Louis. That's right. Oh, thank you so much, Edward. I appreciate that. Yes, this is a fun little brooch. It actually glows under black light. It's got uranium stones with the faux pearls, and it's just fun. I think it matches my hat well. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, Polly's an interesting one. Polly, I don't like Polly. She's just kind of, I don't know. She seems kind of shy and naive and just kind of stuck inside her parents' store. I don't like Polly. And I really don't like her little slimy brother either. He's just bizarre and he's always trying to get into trouble, so I don't really love him. I think that Harry's completely innocent. I just think he happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and got mixed up with the wrong people. But we'll have to see because chapter 25 is going to start right now. I drove until I was hungry and I ate in a roadside restaurant and went on. I had no destination. At random, I chose side roads away from centers of populations. I drove through fields and woods and over mountains, and alone with my loneliness, and probably I wouldn't have returned to Norset if I hadn't promised Berwick and if my absence wouldn't have been misunderstood. Towards the evening, I ate again and headed back. Mr. Hickey sat at his easel under the maple. He wasn't painting. He watched me get out of my car. I hesitated, and then I walked over to him. The easel was blank, no paper or canvas on it. His paint box sat unopened on the ground. Gravely, without greeting, we looked at each other, and I had no idea what he was trying to make up in his mind. "You want to tell me something?" I said. He rubbed his nose with the flat of his hand. "You were right, Harry. I was anxious for you to fall for Mrs. Doane. Did you paint that nude of her purposely to show it to me?" "No, I painted it months before you came here, for my own purpose." A flicker of his pixie smile appeared. Her animal magnetism just fascinated me. Not being young like you, and at any rate, content to remain respectably a married man, I daydream with my paints. I had no intention of showing anybody that picture. You're the only one myself who's seen it." "I don't understand," I said. Mr. Hickey plucked a dandelion from between his feet. "See, I was very fond of Alice Barton. I'd hoped she and Bill would marry." His fingers mangled the dandelion's golden head. "Alice married Kenneth Doane. She broke Bill's heart, and 2 years later she disappeared, and rumors started. First I scoffed at them, but as time passed I changed my mind, and Bill refused to investigate. The pride of a young man who'd been jitted. I couldn't bear to take a chance that he would ever find out that Alice had become a tramp, or at least that she was some kind of floozy that went from man to man." "Well, why didn't you investigate on your own then?" "But I did. I learned that Alice and Doane hadn't been divorced in Florida, and that the winter he and his second wife had been married in New York by the county clerk. But what did that prove? Probably he was guilty of bigamy, nothing else, but Alice was missing. Not even such evidence could be attained, so I kept my mouth shut." "Wait a minute," I said. "Did you offer to paint Mrs. Doane's portrait to give you an excuse to hang around their house?" Riley, the corners of his mouth lifted. "That's a shrewd guess. Yes, I guess I was playing detective, but during those hours I spent with her on the porch, I didn't see or hear anything that helped." He glanced away from me. "When you had lunch with us the other day after you met her and you showed you were interested in her, well, I just tried to play God." "So that's it," I said slowly. "Your idea was that if I became her lover, I'd do my damnedest to pin the murder, or at least bigamy, on him so I could have her all for myself." "Well, it was partly that, but a forlorn hope. Why would you have been able to do better than I? I found those bones. Accident. Listen to me, Harry. Doane had messed up Bill's life by taking Alice away from him. Maybe someday Bill would marry, but he's no longer young. He has no wife, and Jessica and I have no grandchildren. It's a bitter thing, Harry. I wanted Doane punished for that and for whatever he had done to Alice. I wanted that woman he had loved taken away from him as he had taken Alice away from Bill." "And you used me and Layla for revenge?" I said. Revenge. Mr. Hickey thought about the word. "Perhaps what I did hadn't even the dignity of revenge. I'm afraid it was basically boredom. Heaven help me." Like using paint to denude woman, I'm not used to inactivity, and evidently my art is no complete substitute. It's a shameful thing to confess, but in the last 2 days I've made myself face it, and I was pulling strings to make you two lovers. "Well, you didn't succeed," I said. His eyes widened. My dear boy, you were denying that you and Mrs. Don't know, but none of your doing. Don't flatter yourself into thinking that showing me that nude painting of her would make me want her. It happened the minute I saw her. I wouldn't have wanted her if you had never even existed. I suppose so, he muttered. Bill pulled up to the house in his police car. He didn't come over. He waved to us from the entered house. You hated Dome from the day Alice returned to Norset to marry him, I said. But that was nothing to how you felt about him when Bill told you we'd found part of her skeleton. Mr. Hickey nodded absently. The sun was gone, though it was still lit. A breeze chilled me through my shirt. I said, Did you know Doane well? Not well. A gentleman, Mrs. Doane called him. Gentle, Mr. Hickey snorted. Aside from being a chronic wife killer, did you find him gentle when you fought him? I fought him as savagely as he did, and I knocked him out cold, and I don't think I'm particularly vicious. I let a silence hold between us before I said very quietly, Do we really know that he ever killed anybody? Mr. Hickey rose with his paint box. He looked at the sky and then at the stool and the easel, as if wondering whether to take them inside in case it rained. Then he looked at me. What are you getting at now, Harry? I wish I knew. That was true enough. I didn't know anything. I just had to go back to my bungalow. I didn't go in. I kept walking to the road and then up the road. That way, the afternoon I had driven aimlessly in my car. But this time I had a destination, though I didn't know that I wanted to go there. I reached the Doane house in the twilight. No snarling, hungering dogs would ever run out from there to meet a visitor. There was a hollowness in the silence of the place, as if it existed in a vacuum. The porch steps creaked under my feet, even brought back memories, how they would have creaked when I had gone into that house for our first and only complete night together. The door was locked. The police must have shut down the house. But why did I want to go in there? I tried the barn door. It slid open. Little light was left. I saw broken stalls, a rusted harrow, discarded oil drums, and a couple of wrecked tires, a storehouse for junk, and some home for dogs. Only the junk, though, was left. What did I expect to find? The police had gone over everything. The paddock gate was wide open, and for a long moment I stood staring at the gate as if trying to discover something about it. I shook myself and stepped into the paddock. The quarter of the dead horse was there. That was what the dogs had left of it. Doane had died before he had a chance to take it from the sun, and the police hadn't bothered. The smell of it clogged my nostrils and twisted my stomach. Suddenly, I wanted no part of that place or anything that had ever been there. There had been too much flesh and desire, and now all that was left was decay and corruption. In the darkness, I walked home. I piled all the remaining kindling and logs in the wood bin into the fireplace. These nights, a fire was one of my companions. Without it, I didn't think I could endure the emptiness of the bungalow in the evening. I wondered if I was going to pieces. Fire was still a comfort. Sitting close to it, I could relax a little. My inside relaxed with the drowsiness it produced. My thoughts blurred, and that was the best thing that could happen to them, like getting drunk and dull in a memory. The door opened and roused me. It was at my back. I hadn't the energy to stir. Who's there? I mumbled. There was no answer. The door closed. I heard slow footsteps approach on the bare floor. I turned my hand, and then there she was, in the room. She had stopped moving, and there was no light but firelight in its dim fringe. She was taller than I remembered, slimmer, and her face was somehow more vivid. She was changing in my dreams of her, even walking in my dreams. I sank lower into the chair and stared into the fire. I was afraid. The illusion had become far too real. Darling, don't you want me anymore? She said. Now her voice, the sound of it frightened me. When you started hearing voices of the dead, it was a sign that your mind was just crumbling. I turned my head, and she was still there. I looked into the dark, and then I knew. Layla! I cried, stumbling up onto my feet. She came into my arms, vibrant and passionate and alive. All right, guys, that is it for this chapter. Oh my gosh, is Layla really there, or is she just a figment of his imagination? Could Layla still be alive? Oh, that is going to be the question for the next couple of chapters. I did not expect her to still be alive. I mean, I maybe had thought that she had disappeared, but why? And did she kill Dr. Doan? Or now did Hickey Sr., Mr. Hickey, kill Dr. Doan? Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm very excited for the next chapter. So we got to figure out what's happening next. Let's see. Tammy's saying she knew it. Yes, we have a big cliffhanger. So we got to tune in next week. My reading will be continued on Monday. So it'll be continuation of this next couple of chapters will be next Monday. Now, let's see. We are on chapter 26. And I think, so we've got chapter 27. And then I think it's just one more chapter after that. So we may be able to finish up the book next week. So I may be able to do 3 chapters next week all at once. I could do 1 chapter and then 2 chapters. So you guys let me know in the comments what you guys think, what you guys want me to do, and I will do it. The book is falling apart. So the back has totally come off of the book. I'm going to have to tape this together. This book has been through the ringer, much like our characters in the book. So it is dying a slow and sad death like Dr. Doan. But anyway, so yes, our next reading will be Monday. It will be back at our normal reading time, which is 7 o'clock. I've had a little bit of schedule changing due to the fact that Patrick and I worked together a lot, and I was trying to fill in for him while he was gone traveling. So he is back probably next week at his normal time. So we will be back at my normal time for the reading on Monday at 7. So don't forget, this week on my channel, this coming Sunday, I am hosting the next Tales from the Triptych, and that will be on Fostoria coin and American patterns. So if you are interested in that, tune in. The triptych will return. That will be Patrick, Trusty Extra Mercantile, myself, and Soul Nate. And that will be this Sunday on my channel at 8 p.m. So that's coming up. And then we'll have the next reading of this on Monday. And then we'll get to pick our next book. So I've been working with Doo-Wop Bob from the chats. You guys all know and love him. He collects these gold medal books, and he's read a lot of them. So he's kind of helping me pick the next one. I sent him a picture of all the books that I have in my library, and he said that he finds that some of them are not saucy enough, and then some of them are too saucy. So he has narrowed it down to 2 that he thinks will be really, really good for our next read. So we are working on that, and then I might be able to put up a poll too on Instagram and have you guys vote what book you want to do next. But I love these books. I have to say, I get totally invested in them because they're so good. The writing's a little bit strange given that it's from the 50s. I think some of the dialogue in this book, as I've read it, I found that it doesn't flow as we would talk nowadays, but I still think it's quite good. So I don't know. There's probably not a thing as too saucy, but maybe for YouTube. I don't want to get taken off YouTube. So we will definitely have another read coming up very soon after this book. So don't despair. There will be more fun readings and more saucy books from the 50s. So folks, that is going to do it for me tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you on Tales from the Triptych on Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And I hope, folks, as always, that you will stay in, stay safe, and bend YouTube. Bye-bye now.
What?